Welcome everybody, this is Jason Seacrest. We are going to go through a fun little cartoon tutorial today. This is going to be a little bit different. We are going to be using the Wacom tablet with pressure sensitivity so we can kind of get a nice brush stroke or a kind of a brush pen feel with all of our comic strips. So this is going to be a little bit different with all of the other tutorials out there. Now if this is the first time on our site, welcome first of all, and then second, a lot of these videos are designed to be follow along too. Especially for my in-class students, but for people that are following along on YouTube, these are going to be a little bit slower, so you can basically download all of the resource files and then follow directly along, and you get a lot more out of it. So let's get into it and let's have some fun. Now this is a little bit older of a comic of mine, and what I used it for is basically when people have birthdays on Facebook, I kind of send them a nice little cartoon strip. So if you guys are doing your own comics, that's kind of something I would definitely recommend. It kind of gets your name out there, and a lot of people like getting birthday cards. So this file is 1920 pixels by 1080. You could totally modify this, but if you want to follow along just so the brush strokes are going to be the same size, I would recommend it. But anything that's a postcard size really will work. So if it's a 5 by 7 inches, 4 by 6, any of those will actually work. And since we are using it on the computer, I am using RGB. So since this was designed to be viewed on Facebook, use your RGB. So let's go OK. I'm just going to go View. I like to hide my artboards, and that is just so, well, it's just because I like it on my video. That's it. So you do not need to do that. So what we're going to do first, let's go File, Place. What I would like you guys to do is look in the resources in the description, and you should be able to find the bare inking file. You might have to download that from Dropbox. You'll get this exact file, and I'm holding down Shift and Alt just so it's scaling from the middle. While it is still selected, notice we are going to come over to transparency. Let's knock that down to, let's go 40%, and then I'm also going to drop down to our layers menu, and let's drop that into a template. So that's going to knock down the opacity a little bit more, and it's also going to lock the layer out. So let's create a new layer. Let's double click. I'm going to call this one inking. Let's just click that over, and now we are basically ready to go on our tablet. Now I'm going to give in the description, I'm also going to give you a link to the Wacom site, so if you guys have not set it up, they've got a crazy amount of videos that will kind of walk you through all the buttons and things like that. I don't use any of my shortcut keys on the tablet itself, and pretty much on the pen I just have kind of the right click. So that's the only thing I have on my tablet. So all my buttons or shortcut keys on the tablet is actually turned off. So I don't use those. Now my left hand, keep in mind, for especially with Illustrator, that's just hanging out over by my keyboard. So the same area or placement is going to be kind of hanging out on the left side of the keyboard where my Control, Alt, Spacebar, V, A, right? So black arrow is V, selection is A, so it's just hanging out on the left side. So let's do a couple different things. I'm going to double click on the brush. So the two tools we're going to use the most right now are going to be the brush, and we're going to use the blob brush for coloring. Now I have tolerance 4 for fidelity. Smoothness, I have this right around 30-32%. You guys can totally modify this. Now typically I have this up a little bit just so if I sneeze, well, if I sneeze it's probably going to be a little bit, but if my hand gets stuck a little bit, or if I have a little bit too much coffee, it'll actually smooth that out. Now on my options, I do not have fill new brush strokes, and I do not have keep selected. Okay, so those are the things I have. I do have edit paths, and those are what my options are. Now let's go up to, let's just create a new brush. This one is going to be fine. Let's go 7 points, and what I want to make sure we have selected is the pressure. And right now you're going to notice that it's going to have the exact same. So there's really no pressure. I want to make variation, and I want to bring that all the way up. So I've got some really fat, and then I've got a very skinny one over here. So if I barely push, it's going to have some pretty high line width or variation. So if I go very light to very hard, I've got a pretty decent amount of line variation going on. Now some of you will, if you've watched any of the other videos, there are cartoon brushes, right? It's a little bit sloppier, but that's kind of what we're mimicking on the other tutorials. So hopefully it's all making sense now. Alright, so let's get right into it. Our brushes are ready to go. I've got 1 point. I don't have anything on the fill. I'm using black. Now when you are drawing, especially if you guys are kind of brand new to this, my recommendation is try and keep it fairly the same size that you would normally. So if I'm doing this movement, I'm just using my fingers. As soon as I start getting bigger, now my whole hand, you might even be able to hear it on the microphone. So now I'm moving my whole hand, and I think that's a little bit more tricky to start off with. So you guys have these files, and the idea is I can push a little bit harder, and I'm going to be able to get my line variation. Now, as you guys are practicing, things I just want you to be just aware of is as lines merge, that's a good area to have things nice and fat. And as they go floating in the middle, that's where you're going to want it to kind of taper. So fat when they touch, and you're going to taper when it goes out into space. So you're going to probably know this in most of these lines, right? That's where the taper is going to be. Now I still have my left hand hanging out on the left hand side, and the other thing we're going to use is blob brush. So as we are inking here, I'll just start filling in my black areas just so I can see them. So blob brush, and I'll explain the difference. So this is our regular brush. So if I go black to black selection, black arrow, this is a stroke. If I go Shift B, now it's a blob brush. You're going to notice that it's just a fill at this point. So this is now considered a shape rather than this. Okay? Now keep in mind, if I go File Expand, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so it's just a step after. But from when we're doing all of our shading, especially big black areas, you don't want to be filling in with strokes. Your computer will die on you. Alright, let's go back. Now if at any point you feel like, hey, let's zoom this in, if you feel like that's easier, oh, no problem. I will say that when you zoom in, I feel like the pressure sensitivity goes up a little bit. So I'm going to go light. These are always fun. Dark, light. So I'm trying to get a little bit of variation, and it's going to taper out. Now what's kind of fun about this is it does not have to be perfect. So this tutorial is kind of a nice one to start with because it's just kind of fun. We don't have to worry necessarily too much about everything being perfect. So a lot of those other tutorials when we're doing like logos, that's where we're getting really, really tight with Illustrator. And this one, especially with cartoons or comic strips, your pen can be a lot more loose. So relax, have some fun. We're coming down, light, push hard. Now when I do this, more than likely you'll start seeing, especially with longer lines, you'll start seeing that smoothness kind of pop out. I'm just doing dots. Come around. Light, 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 light. And then I'll smooth it out. Now I will be, as we do this, let's do some little tips. It's a lot easier, just so everyone is aware, especially if you've already kind of started this process, to go light in the beginning and then push hard, or vice versa, push hard and then kind of lighten up. I always think the lightening up on the second half is trickier. Alright, this is going to be a good another little example. Nice learning moment here. Alright, so also, if I say, hey, you know what, I want this down, always remember this is still Illustrator. So I just come back in, notice I've got my white arrow selection, there's my direct selection tool, grab that point, and just drop it down. So I see a lot of people that will, especially in other videos, and if I'm walking around the classroom, a lot of times I'll see kids just Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, trying to get it perfect. If it's pretty close, just understand that it's still Illustrator. We can have some fun. We can always modify pretty much everything. Come around. Now if ever I go a little bit too fast, you guys can always slow it down. Okay, I'll fix that later. I want a little bit more of a shoulder line there. This is going to come in. I'm going to give him a little bit more of a broken edge on that one. Okay, let's zoom in just for the sake of argument. I was trying to do the pen tool before and I didn't care for it as much, so let's do black fill. Right now I have a stroke, but doesn't really matter. Let's do circle again, and I want that to be white. I do not need a fill on that one, or a stroke. Okay, that looks good. Hold down shift, right click. I want to group those. I'm holding down alt, by the way. Alt is option on your Mac, by the way. I know some people always ask that one. Okay, I'm going to go Shift B, back to the blob brush. Let's fill these in. Back to the brush, by the way, and I'm just pushing. Let's get some of the little shadows coming in right now. Okay, Baby Bear's done. Let's move right on over. If you guys are brand new to Illustrator, spacebar is going to be the little hand. Just so you don't have to come over here every time, just spacebar, and then you guys can move. I'm going to shrink this down. I kind of like the size we were doing. Push hard, and now I'm lightening up my pressure. You can definitely see that was the smoothness setting. Now some people will really like that. Whenever we try and start getting into sharp edges, that really it's actually very challenging to kind of get the sharp edges because it's going to try and smooth everything out. So you can always drop that down. Now if I zoomed in, you'd actually see how shaky sometimes my lines are, which I totally don't want you guys to see. So, but yeah, that's kind of what's cleaning that process up. Alright, so since this is Illustrator, we can have some fun too. I'm going to go minus, and I just want to get rid of that point. So remember, I can always modify these points, and it becomes very flexible, rather than me trying to have to draw everything every time perfectly. Back to brush. I'm going to give him a little tooth. Shift B, back to blob brush. Let's just start filling in some of the little holes. Now you guys could totally do blob brush at the end while we start doing value. It really doesn't matter. Some little lines here. Now some little tidbits. Let's do some tidbits right now while we're doing this. Some things, since we're already kind of on the second guy, you might start seeing things you like, or you're having some trouble with things. So some little things you might have trouble with is depending on your pressure. Some of you might say, well, I'm really good at the thick lines, but those thin lines are driving me crazy. Or it could be the opposite too. So things you can modify at this point is you can always come back in, double click, okay, you can always modify this point, or we've got other ones as well. So we have, this is a 7, I have a 10, and I have a 3. So you guys can modify just the brush size, and that can give you some other variation. The other little thing you can modify is, hey, you know what, I don't need the 1. So you can always say, hey, maybe that's too much. and I can drop down the variation. So that's another little version you guys can do as well. And a lot of this is just play with it, find out what you like, what you don't like, and then just kind of go from there. So that's how I learned, just fudge with it. Okay, I'm going to break them up. I want some more tufts over here. As we're drawing, also notice that as best as I can, I don't want floating lines, especially if I don't want them to. So especially like in the ear here, I was trying to close each shape, so I'm kind of being pretty deliberate with making sure the lines are actually overlapping when I want them to. There's going to be other lines where I don't want them to overlap. Okay. Now we're going to come back and do some cross-hatching. Now I've done this video a couple times, and the idea is I don't want to bore you guys to death with trying to add as much cross-hatching as I would like, so I'm going to try and modify that just so, for the sake of argument, I'm not boring you guys to death. Alright, we're going to come in nice and light. This is going to be pretty dark over here, so I'm going to be pushing pretty hard. Okay, we are just crushing it, guys. Good. Alright, Mama Bear. And this one should be a little bit easier since we already have a pretty good ink drawing underneath it. If you guys are importing your pencil drawings, sometimes you're going to have a little bit more decisions to make on, hey, where do I want thin lines, where do I want my fat lines to go. So good rule of thumb again is right when things touch, that's where they should be fat, but also anything kind of on the bottom or in the shadows, that would be another good little area to add kind of a fat. So if I want her to be pretty dark on this side, going the shoulder, I know those are going to be thicker lines. I'm going to go taper. Good. Bring it down. Do that one again. Now the only thing that you can't really modify after the fact is the pressure. So if I'm drawing and the pressure gets all out of whack, you might have to redraw it with your pressure more controlled. Drop down. And not that anyone really needs to know, but I have a pretty old tablet, by the way. It's an Intuos. I think I got this one back in, who knows, 06, 07. So it is a fairly old tablet at this point, but works fine. And mine is not the any of the fancy ones with the screen on it, so you do not need to have that. All right, that looks like inking. Let's do another little thing. All right, teachable moment. We're going to be here. I'm holding shift, and there's our straight line. And I want our taper. There we go. So we'll delete this in a sec. All right, so let's select it. So notice I've got the black arrow. Click C. C is our cut. That is our scissor tool, by the way. If you want to know where the scissor tool is, it's hiding under your eraser. And all we're going to do is we're going to select. So notice I clicked a point here and on her face, and now I basically just deleted that segment, so I don't have a big thing. Alright, let's zoom in a tiny bit so we can draw Goldilocks, who is not having a good day. And then we are done with the inking. Done and done. Nice and slow. Go fat, come back in. Pushing pretty hard. I go fat on the bottom. Now we can always come back in and mess around, so if you do any overlapping, or we're going to drop that down quite a bit. So this is just black arrow, by the way. Okay, I like that there. So that's kind of the nice part about inking on Illustrator. You guys have a whole lot of flexibility after you get the line down. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. Let's get the cheek out more. Let's see if we can get that. There you go. Push it pretty hard since it's on the bottom. These little guys, this would be a good area, especially if those are getting fat on you, that you can switch up the brush. So if I was doing this on paper, we would have kind of like a pocket brush, something for a lot of the line variation, and then we would come back in with a real thin, either a 0.5 or a 0.3 for all of the details. So you are allowed to have multiple pens when actually inking, so you can do the same thing. Let's do a couple different ones. We'll do some straight lines with this one. Hold down shift, hold down shift. Now notice that the right under that hand there is a shadow, so we do have a little bit of flexibility with how this is going to read. So all this bottom stuff is going to get covered up. Good. Let's do this. Good. Let's do the same thing. Shift, shift. Okay, let's do some feet over here. Come back up, drop down, drop down. Let's come back on this side. back down, drop back down. Keep in mind that you could also duplicate if you wanted to do that too. I'm going to take this guy, let's just pop it over a tiny bit. We missed that line. Good. Do the wicks. I have very little pressure right now, very little pressure. And anytime you feel like you need to zoom in, feel free to zoom in. Okay, looking good. Let's go over here. Shift. Let's just draw kind of a line there. I'm going to do black arrow. Remember, some of this is going to be in the shadow anyway. So let's go Shift B. Let's do our blob brush. And let's just kind of do the outside. Now on the blob brush, a lot of you guys have already kind of seen that there's a little bit of smoothing still, but they don't have a lot of the pressure's not there. Now for the brush brackets next to the P key, so just combine OP and you'll find your brackets right there, and that'll change the brush size. And then we're just going to fill that in. We'll be using the blob brush quite a bit next when we start doing all of our base colors. But I think we're getting pretty close here. So we're in Illustrator, so let's use it. You guys didn't think I was going to do a circle, did you? Dun, dun, dun. Pop that up. Okay, looks good. Let's bump up the stroke. Looks good. I'm going to go black arrow, go Alt, and I'm just bringing up that line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click C for cut, and then let's just kind of come over here, and then we'll delete the rest. Let's do it. Let's do it. If you guys have cartoon brushes, I will give you that as well. But what I'm looking for is our tapered one. So it'll go fat, skinny in the middle. So notice in the middle it's skinny, and then it's fat over here. Let's drop that down. Okay, good. Maybe we'll bring this back over. Okay, let's go circle. I've got the C again, so there's my scissors tool. Click here, and we're going to come back over here. So black arrow. I should be able to get rid of the line through the face, line through the shoe. We can just pop that over. Alright, what do you think? I say we are ready for a save check. File save. Bears. I'll do bears too. All of these are always, typically all of those are, I don't ever mess with those, so you guys can save those with the default setting. So we are pretty much done with the inking side, so now we're going to transition into adding value, doing our cross-hatching, and then we're going to start doing kind of cartoon color. So those are the next steps for the tutorial here. Okay, so we have inking done. Lock that out. Let's just do value on this one. So now we're going to do a little bit more with the hatching. And now I'm not going to go as extreme on the hatching that I did on the sample we showed, just because I did it once and that is some boring TV. Me showing you guys how to put in 1,000 lines right now is really not that exciting. So what we're looking to do is just kind of add on to the fur aspect of it. And I haven't changed brushes, same brushes. But I just want to kind of think of, hey, where could some value be? Where could I add some fun little textures? So this is almost more about adding fur than a whole lot of value right now. Let's do black over here. Shift B, blob brush. Let's do that over here. Decisions, right? For the sake of argument, we're getting pretty close. Alright, I say, for the sake of argument, we're probably good to go. So let's do cartoon colors. Now on our, let's go new layer. Let's just lock that guy out. We're going to just drag that down. And I'm just going to do, so this is things that we're doing. We want inking, these two are pretty much the same, so it doesn't really matter if the order on these. But when we do our color layer, so here's going to be our color layer. I want that below all of our inking lines. Alright, so we're going to do new layer, and we want that underneath, and we want the top two. So we want inking locked out, we want value locked out. Alright, so let's go File, Place. Let's see if I can find it. You should, in your descriptions, now of course if I can find it. Downloads, or is it in Photos? I say it's in Photos. Pictures, there we go. So you'll see Bear's color palette. Let's place that. And there'll just be a row of colors, so we can pretty much do this fairly quickly, and we can be fairly accurate. Most of you guys have creative license, so have some fun with that. So if you guys don't necessarily want the exact same color palette, or you want to kind of switch them around, feel free. Okay, now I'm going to give you kind of the next step, and then we're going to just fly through it. So I'm going to kind of speed through it because it's literally coloring a coloring book, and I think everyone can figure that out. So we're going to go color. Right, everything is locked out. I'm going to come over to blob brush. Alright, so remember, we've got our bracket keys. Brackets will adjust the size of things. So what we're going to do is use the eyedropper, and let's just say I want to use brown. Shift B, and then we're going to come in, and we're going to start coloring a coloring book for the most part. Now you're going to notice, see all these open gaps within our inking? Typically if we're doing a cartoon strip and we're being a little bit looser with our pen lines, that's why the live paint bucket doesn't work as well. So this is just a way of us still building shapes. I have some of my students that just exclusively do this, and even if you guys are still trying to build a custom shape with the pen tool, this will also be a lifesaver for you. But all we're doing is we're basically drawing. Right? So I don't want anyone to overthink this. I am just coloring. And then also notice that when I draw, it looks like it's going over the lines. And then I let go and it pops. So that's why it's underneath. Now if this was above, then it would be basically, it'll look like it's coloring everything out. So if it does stay, or if your lines aren't popping, the black lines aren't popping, just double check your layer window and just double check that that color is below. So all we're doing right now is we're just adding kind of a base color. So I'm not too concerned. We are going to come back and add in our, I'm going to do a cast shadow. We're going to do some little bit more fancy coloring than the first initial demo that I showed you. And then at a certain point, I think I've been testing out some different easier ways to do cross-hatching. That's not going to bore you guys to death. So when I have that done, I'll do another little video for you. Alright, let's zoom in. Shift B. Again, bracket keys. And what we're looking to do is I want all of one big shape. So if I select, and here's just the thought process if you guys want to speed through this, is if I select the body, it's one big shape. Alright, so I'm looking to make sure that all these little spaces are filled in. But if I go black, right, I can just select the body, and now it's one nice big shape. So that's the idea. But you can kind of see that this is, many of you are not going to be freaked out about this one. This is a very simple process. We are doing our coloring book. Alright, so I'm going to speed through this, and I'm just going to show you after we're kind of done with this, just the process for your coloring. Okay, so I say, there's my baby bear. So I can say, hey, eyedropper, so I can go eye, or I click on the eyedropper. Hey, I want to color, Shift B, double check your brackets, and then I would just start coloring in. So that's our process. I'm going to speed through it, and then we are going to be ready to go for our gradients after this. Alright, so we are pretty much back at this point. Here's really the thing that we're looking to check. Right, so now that if I click on majority of the colors, that they're going to be all selecting together. So that's kind of the idea. So other little things just to be double checking. We want to go through and we want to make sure that we don't have any little tiny holes, or at least noticeable holes, especially when we start adding our background. Other thing to just double check is that you did fill in your white areas. So right now it'll look fine. As soon as we add some background shapes, it'll look a little funky. Okay, so we just filled in some flat colors. We didn't do anything fancy yet. We can add some cast shadows, but let's just kind of do some, let's kind of start working on our gradients, shall we? Alright, so over here we do have some of the gradients already ready to go. And what we're looking to do is, let's select the bear first. What I'm going to do is Control C, which is just Control Copy, Control F. So that is paste in front. So all I did is I basically duplicated out the bear hair. And what we are looking to do is come over to our gradient. I'm going to use my eyedropper, and we are just going to click on our gradient here. Alright, so that's probably how it's going to have to play out with you guys. So we're going to do a radial gradient. I'm going to come over and go yellow. You are not happy. Double click. Holy moly. Double click. That's just going to be a brown. Now I'm going to add a little bit of transparency to it, especially in this area. Let's drop that down to 40. This is radial. And I still want them to read pretty much as a brown bear. Now why we do the double layer is as soon as we start adding transparent gradients, it does get a little funky sometimes. So that's why we do that. We're going to take this and we're going to go right by our candles now. So that's going to be some light here. Now the major thing is just how much light you want to be coming off of there. Alright, that looks okay. So I'm going to then go do the same thing. Control C, Control F. I just get to click on it. Now I'm going to go linear. And I want that to come in over here. I don't want this is as crazy, so let's just kind of drop that down. Okay. Control C, Control F. Okay. Looks good. So we're going to go radial. Actually, let's just do Control C. Go backwards. Let's just select all of them while we're at it. Control C, Control F. Let's go white over here. And I want this to be radial. $60. Drop that down to 50. That works okay. Okay, those are all radial. Good. So now we just have to click on our gradient tool, and we're going to take this, and we just want the white kind of up at the top of the nose. You can modify like how far out you want them if you want to get crazy. Control C, Control F. I don't think we're going to be able to get any of it. Let's go purple. Looks good. I just want that up by okay, banging on all cylinders. We're just crushing it. Okay, so let's do a little more blob brush. I feel like we need a little more. Control Z. I want some more values down here. Alright, let's do some background, shall we? So for the most part, base colors, we've got some gradients. I am not too, I'm okay with that. No, we can definitely get fancier with things, but just for the sake of time here, let's keep it rolling, shall we? So this is what we're going to do. I am going to flip this. Let's just color it. Let's eyedropper it out. Let's go green. Now I'm going to go line tool. And let's just, I'm holding shift by the way. I'm going straight across. Let's select those. Pathfinder. Let's just divide those up. We're going to ungroup them. So this is Pathfinder. We just divided them. And now we're ungrouping them. So now we have up and we have down. So on the bottom here, let's do more of a gray. And I do want a gradient on this one as well. I want a linear gradient. You know what? I don't mind the purple. Don't mind it at all. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to 100%. I like the grayed out version a little bit better. Good. Let's go opposite. Okay. Now some of you might be saying, what's going on? Arrange. Send it back. Let's do this one. Arrange. We can go send it back. Alright, we've got the background selected now. Control C, Control F. I want a radial one on this one. Which one do we have? Let's do eyedropper. Just drag that guy over. Get the green off. Radial, good. And I want that hanging out over here. Okay. We were crushing it, guys. Crushing it. Alright, I've got the square selected. I'm just going to drag this down. D. And all we're going to do now is we are going to get a border. Okay, looks good. So next, let's do this. So what we are looking for, and I'll just type it, and then we're going to show you where you can download it, and I'll show you where to be finding some more stuff. So the type, fonts. Now, so I am going to be using Cartoon Regular. Now my rule with text is typically I like to probably modify the leading a bit. And the idea is that we can read it. So just double check that, especially as you're scaling things, that people don't have to struggle to read the text. Okay, so that's the idea. And now let's go. I'm just going to bounce around here. So now I have it in the description, but I just want to kind of show you the site because it's kind of cool. I'm just on Dafontcom, but you have two categories where it's cartoon, and you've got all sorts of different things you could be kind of going for, and then you also have comic as well. So just depending on what type of comic you're drawing, you might say, hey, this one looks pretty awesome. Download. It's going to zip, so I'm just going to show you how to use the site in the next 10 seconds here. I want to extract. I want to show. Extract. Boom, there it is. Sure. Open, and then you just basically install it. Boom, there you go. Now I got that font. So it is a very quick process. Typically I go on whenever I need something specific. So when I was doing St. Patrick's Day shirts, I know I came over and I started looking at you know, Celtic lettering and things like that. So you guys can be pretty specific on what you're using for, or if you're looking for specific handwriting. Usually it's a little bit easier if you know you're going for something specific and then coming over. So I used Cartoon Regular. And then there it is. So you can go right here, but if you don't like those and you want to kind of keep going through, no problem. I also gave you the file already in the description, so you can just download it and basically install. So it's already been expanded. You don't have to do anything goofy, and then you can go from there. Alright, so let's go rounded rectangle. I want a white. Let's go right here. Looks good. And let's go backwards. Alright, we're not going to do pen tool. We'll just do brush. So if I go brush, and I can just flip those over. Then we don't have to do brush. Then we don't have to do pen today. Now you can, I don't mind that at all actually now that I'm looking at it. Let's go to Pathfinder. And then I'll just add those guys together. Send backward. So if you want as is, so let's do this. Select, center, center. I don't like that like that. I want it to center. Let's eyeball it. Okay, that looks good. Now if I want to add a stroke, come on over. Let's go black. That looks a little aggressive. Okay. I don't know. I think we have a cartoon, guys. So at this point, sign away, and let's go to our layers. So let's get rid of, just so this doesn't show. We can delete our palette at this point in time. I'm going to go File, Save for Web. I'm going to go JPEG, by the way. Now, things that I don't have is I don't have Clip to Artboard. Well, that's interesting. Let's see what's over there. Yeah, don't save your template layer. Save. Now, since we weren't paying attention to our artboard, right? I can go 1920, and then it'll bring back my my size. And I don't even know if that was their correct size, but I can readjust it. And since it's Illustrator, it really doesn't matter. My size is not that important at this point. And then I can just go File, Save. Let's go Bears. Save, save, save. And then we're basically ready to save up. So at that point, that's it. So this was a cartoon one. This is going to be focusing again. We did a little bit different stuff with Blob Brush. We did a little bit different stuff with the inking using the Wacom tablet. Now on this one we did do line variation. I am going to do some other ones, just kind of speed inking. I know some people were just kind of looking for a faster way of using the pen tool or other variations on that, so I'll do some other tutorials. If you guys like the videos, make sure you guys do subscribe. This keeps it public for non-classroom students. Just lets me know that you guys are watching. And then also we've got a crazy amount of other cartoon tutorials that are based in Illustrator. And again, I do read all of the comments, so if you guys have anything more specific, or if you guys have any cartoons that you want me to start inking or doing some demos on, make sure you guys are putting that in the comments section. And I look forward to doing the next video for you.